Welcome to the Viking Age podcast, the official podcast of thevikingage.com. My name is Chris Schad. I'm a writer for the Viking Age Zone coverage, bringing the news and the Brookings Register, and we do this every Monday with a late week episode right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're also in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. But however you consume us, make sure you rate, comment, like, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. Now, I did have a guest plan for today's show. It fell through. So today is a solo tour. If you want to help me and you're watching the show live, go ahead, give me a comment, drop it in the comments box. I'll run through them all towards the end of the show. But we're going to go online for about 30 or 40 minutes, kind of talk about things that are happening surrounding the Minnesota Vikings. And I think the first thing that we have to talk about is the Kirk Cousins tampering penalties. The NFL levied their decision on, or made their decision. I don't really know what your word to use there, but they made their decision on the tampering penalty on Thursday afternoon. Kind of surprising it wasn't a Friday news dump, but maybe there were some last second negotiations going on. But after months of an investigation, the NFL has found the Falcons to be guilty of tampering charges. Now, Vikings fans were very anxious to hear this news because they felt like the Falcons did the Vikings dirty when they signed Kirk Cousins. Instead, the NFL docked the Falcons a fifth-round pick in the 2025 NFL draft. They will be fined $250,000 as an organization, and general manager Terry Fontenot will be fined $50,000. So that's it. There's not a lot going on for the tampering investigation. And the NFL stepped in and basically did nothing. And if you look at the previous penalties that had been levied since Roger Goodell has taken over in 2006, it didn't ever look like the Vikings were going to get compensation, but it kind of got overblown as we got closer to the draft. Mike Florio said, hey, maybe they'll switch picks. There were some other things like Adam Schefter saying that they felt like the transgressions were really bad for the Falcons compared to another tampering case that was going on with Saquon Barkley. But you look back at tampering cases, and this seems almost on par to what they've done before. The 49ers gave the Bears a fifth-round pick for tampering with Lance Briggs in 2008. I don't know if that was a settlement or something that was decided on by Commissioner Goodell, but the Bears actually got compensation, even though Briggs didn't even sign with the 49ers. The Lions so I had to swap fifth-round picks with the Chiefs, and they lost a seventh-round pick in 2011 after Gunther Cunningham tampered with the Chiefs players. Basically, Cunningham had an interview with the Detroit Free Press and said, hey, Kansas City's going to let go of these players. I would love to be there to pick them up and add them to my defense. Can't do that. That's not a good thing. So the NFL swooped in. They gave the Lions some penalties. A few years later, 5 to be exact, the Chiefs lost a 2016 third-round pick and a 2017 fourth-round pick, after tampering with Jeremy Maclin, receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles, signed with the Chiefs in the offseason. Not really a big penalty there. I mean, a third-round pick was the largest penalty that had been doled out to date. And, of course, a fourth-round pick, too. So, I mean, it's a pretty hefty penalty, but it wasn't one that, completely screwed over the Chiefs. Like, they got their wide receiver. They were just down a couple of draft picks. And the Eagles didn't receive anything in return. The Dolphins then, this has really picked up over the last couple of years is what I'm saying. The Dolphins came in, they tried to tamper with Tom Brady and Sean Payton, and they lost the 2023 first-round pick. They lost a 2024 third-round pick, and Stephen Ross was also suspended for a year. Now, I think a lot of Vikings fans will look at that and say, what's the difference between what happened with the Falcons and Kirk Cousins? There was a lot of other things going on in that tampering case. The first of all, resulting in a discriminatory lawsuit from Brian Flores. Flores accused the Dolphins of setting up a pay-for-tanking scheme. So if he lost games, he would get rewarded for that. And, of course, he didn't want to do that because, obviously, he would get canned because the Dolphins will be like, well, he only went 3-4 13 or whatever. And it proved to be right because the Dolphins were talking to Sean Payton the entire time, who was under contract with the New Orleans Saints. By the way, if I do sound a little groggy, I got some allergy things going on right now. It's not sick, it's just kind of nestling in my throat. So I apologize if I'm a little bit uh, loopy, little allergy drugs, little phlegm in the back of the throat, not to get graphic, but lots of things going on right now. So the Dolphins lose their 2023 first round pick and a 2024 third round pick. And I think that whole Tom Brady thing with the pay for play, the Brian Flores thing, that was viewed as, in the NFL, you don't disgrace the shield, in their words, right? You don't want to go in there and do something that would bring the NFL bad publicity, and implying that teams are tanking to lose games, especially with the newfound relationship with gambling, players getting suspended for gambling and a lot of other things going on. The NFL doesn't want people to think that teams are out there just throwing games, because that'll compromise their relationship with a lot of the gambling sites and everything else out there. So there was a reason the Dolphins were hit so hard. This is a little different, in my opinion, because this is, Kirk Cousins signing somewhere else didn't really disgrace the shield when you think about it, right? Because I think everybody kind of realized Kirk was leaving. Like, he was going to go to the highest bidder. We had heard that since he snapped his Achilles in Green Bay. The Vikings wanted to keep telling people that they were in it, but it never really seemed like they wanted to keep Kirk. And as we learned in the press, this could have been part of the thing, that in the press conference, they said, hey, we wanted to target a quarterback in 2024. We wanted to kind of establish life after Kirk Cousins. And when it wound up being this year, maybe the NFL looked at that and been like, well, he was leaving anyway, and the Falcons doing what they didn't really impact Cousins. It just gave an offer a couple days earlier. And I wrote about this at Zone Coverage. This is kind of like the NFL's version of Fight Club, right? Because I feel like a lot of teams go and they tamper, especially when it comes to the NFL scouting combine. Like St. Elmo's might as well just have, Kevin O'Connell and Mike McCartney brawling until both of them have black eyes in the kitchen or somewhere, because teams talk to agents at the combine. Players aren't there, but agents are. So, executives are there, drinks start flowing. They go to Mike McCartney, Kirk Cousins' agents, and say, hey, heard you kind of want to get paid. What are you thinking? And those are where the conversations kind of start. Nothing has ever been done about it. We hear about it every year. And, Kevin O'Connell the next day went on NFL Network during their coverage and alluded to the Falcons talking to Kirk Cousins' agent. And I have the quote here, so you'll have to forgive me for story time with Chris Schad. But he said, I know Kirk is going to go through a full process. He's a process guy. And hopefully we continue to be a strong part in that process, and we figure out a way to keep him a Minnesota Viking. The combine gave everybody else an opportunity, whether they were supposed to be or not, to maybe have some of those conversations. Of course, Cousins agreed to a 4-year, $180 million contract within hours of the negotiation window last March rather. And everybody's antennas kind of went up, like, something doesn't seem right. You just can't just hack out a massive contract in 90 minutes or whatever it was. And maybe there was some interest beforehand, but Cousins also went to his press conference and kind of in a oblivious manner said, oh, everybody's so nice here. I talked to the PR staff. I talked to the medical staff. And both of those are against NFL rules before the tampering window. So, I mean, he kind of outed himself, because you can't have contact with the team staff or any of that until the official start of the league year, which is 2 days after the NFL's tampering window opened. There were also reports that he called Darnell Mooney and Charlie Warner, and he also said, hey, come to Atlanta. I'm going to be here. We heard the account of him talking to Kyle Pitts and Kyle Pitts recruiting him there. That stuff happens throughout the NFL. And I think in a lot of ways, I mean, you think about it this way, the Vikings crying foul, a lot of teams did what the Falcons did. And the Falcons just did it to a higher degree, which is why they're being punished. But if the NFL punished the Falcons for what they did in the Kirk Cousins case, it might open a can of worms. And this is where the Fight Club thing comes in. Because within the first hour of free agency, DeAndre Smith agreed to a deal with the Bears. I believe Saquon Barkley, who again had his own tampering investigation and they found nothing wrong there, he also agreed to a deal within the first couple hours of free agency. And the Vikings, I mean, look at their first day of free agency. Jonathan Grenard signed within that first hour. You also had Andrew Van Ginkel sign. You had Blake Cashman sign. You know, maybe there's a possibility they waited, but there had to have been some contact to get that contract done as quickly as they did. So I think, you know, you would love to think Grenard wanted to be a Viking so bad that he just said, hey, call them right away. Yeah, is this your first offer? Good. But I mean, these are negotiations. They have to go back and forth in some degree. And that takes time, a little more than 15 or 45 minutes, whatever it was, on that opening day of free agency. So I don't know. I mean, there is a problem. It's ramping up a little bit because this is our second like high profile tampering case in the last couple of years. But what do you do about it if you're the NFL? Because I think a lot of scouts and GMs, they're going to keep talking at the combine. They're going to keep going to St. Elmo's. And I think maybe the only thing that you could do is move up the start of free agency. Maybe you have that before the combine so this doesn't happen. General managers probably wouldn't like that because they want extended time to, you know, sort out the salary cap and everything else. But if you started that at the beginning of March, or more even, you know, if you wanted to start it at the combine and just say, okay, you know, it's all good now. You can talk at the combine. You can negotiate contracts. Free agency is open. You see it in the NFL, or excuse me, you see it in the NBA. Season ends. They have their draft and free agency right away within like 2 weeks. The NHL is the same way. They're going to have their draft later this month, and then they're going to go have free agency. You know, MLB is a little different because they do their draft in the middle of the season and they do a lot of weird stuff. But the NFL has that option to switch things around. And I think, too, it would work because I know the NFL wants to have their constant news cycle and like something at all times during the offseason, but you could also get away with that because you could have March as your free agency month. Then April is kind of the draft hype and, you know, getting everybody excited for that. You have the draft in April. May, you have your schedule release. June, you have OTAs and all the TikTok speculation out there. July is just kind of whatever. I don't know. I jokingly call it don't get arrested month or do something stupid. Like don't blow your hand off with a firework like Jason Pierre-Paul did. That's kind of what July is. And then next thing you know, you have preseason football in August and you have the season starting in September. So I don't know. I guess that would be my idea. Maybe you put the draft ahead of free agency, although I think a lot of those things would continue because they'll find a way. Like, that's the NFL. You're trying to look for every advantage you can, whether it's on the field or off the field. And that's what happened here. The Falcons went to the combine. They saw Kirk Cousins' agent. They talked to his agent, which is perfectly legal. And then they kind of hammered out the details here and there. They also, you know, went above and beyond what is kind of the code, to put it in a lack of a better terms, and they were punished for it. So I know a lot of Vikings fans are upset because it just kind of gives off the vibe of we don't really care, do whatever you want to do. But it's unfortunately just the way it's been. And if the NFL doesn't want to change that, there's nothing the Vikings can do. So I don't know. I mean, I never thought the Vikings were going to get a pick, and then Steam kind of picked up that, you know, they could swap picks or get something from the Falcons in return. It just never seemed likely because, like I said, when you look back at previous tampering cases, you don't really see too much. So that's kind of what's going on here. So if you're just joining us, thank you. This is the Viking Age podcast. My name is Chris Schad, doing a solo tour today on the podcast. If you're watching, you got a comment, you got a question or whatever, go ahead, drop it in the comments. I'll get to those at the end of the show and we'll wrap things up here. We got about, 15, 20 minutes left. Kind of want to keep this around 30 minutes, but yeah, just give me some Viking stuff. of course, the Vikings wrapped up OTAs this week, and we're kind of seeing a lot of low predictions for the Vikings when it comes to this week. And I guess we'll just use this. Are people sleeping on the Vikings right now? Um, I think there's a bit of a Sam Darnold effect going on right now. Sam Darnold signed with the Vikings. He was that temporary replacement for Kirk Cousins. I think a lot of people freaked out when they saw that contract and they're like, oh my God, you're replacing Kirk Cousins with Sam Darnold. And they draft JJ McCarthy and it was like, oh, okay, this isn't too bad. But when you look at the Vikings right now, they're underdogs in 14 of 17 games. Gilbert Manzano of Sports Illustrated got some clicks. And we love Sports Illustrated. Sports Illustrated's under the fan-sided umbrella, or I think fan-sided's under the SI umbrella. So just pointing it out, he went ahead and he said the Vikings are going to win 3 games next year. I don't think that's possible, but it could happen. We look at this and we look at Sam Darnold as the quarterback, and our brains just automatically go, because the quarterback is such a high-profile position, we just go, Sam Darnold is bad, like a flashcard word association, right? We saw Sam Darnold struggle in New York. We saw him, the seeing ghost thing, which has kind of defined his career so far. He goes to Carolina. He has to play under Matt Rule. A lot of infrastructure things going on there. You could really point a lot of fingers as to why Sam Darnold has struggled to this point. But, I think there's a bit of optimism within TCO Performance Center. And it's another kind of thing that happens in the NFL where he plays under Kyle Shanahan for a year. He, it's like the learning tree thing, right? He goes to Kyle Shanahan and he goes, no, this is how things are done. He's got a better supporting cast to practice around. He learns behind Brock Purdy. He hits the market and he gets that starter deal. I'm not expecting Sam Darnold to have the Baker Mayfield year, which is kind of like what everybody is saying his ceiling is. But I think that he can have a good year. I've said it before. The Vikings can win 10 games with Sam Darnold as quarterback because I like the infrastructure that much. You have Kevin O'Connell on the sideline. You have a strong supporting cast with Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones in the backfield, Ty Chandler spelling him. You have Jordan Addison. You have 2 great bookend tackles, Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill. And you also have TJ Hawkinson when he comes back from injury, which might not be until midseason, but that's a hell of a lot better than throwing it to Chosen Anderson or Quincy Enunwa, who you've probably had on your fantasy teams at some point. Dole Loggins was his offensive coordinator, and you had Adam Gase as his head coach. Not a lot of great things. So I don't know. When it comes to Sam Darnold's expectations, I'm keeping them tempered because we have seen, it's out there, the whole seeing ghost thing. People look at that and they just automatically assume that is Sam Darnold. And he could get out on the field during training camp, look awful, and not be very good. But we all know this job is eventually going to be JJ McCarthy's. And if Sam Darnold isn't playing up to snuff, they're going to give JJ McCarthy the job and they're going to have him out there because this team wants to win games. We look at this team and we go, okay, maybe they have to take a step back, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could turn around and surprise people. Look at last year. You can see a whole bunch of examples that the Vikings could fall. The Los Angeles Rams, I believe they were 3-6 at one point. They finished the year 10-7. They go into the playoffs. They give Detroit a run for its money up in Detroit, and they come up short. But you feel good about what that year is, especially since a lot of people left them for dead after they went full Rams a couple of years ago. The Green Bay Packers. I know people will throw up in their mouth when I say that, but that is another example of a team the Vikings could be this year. A team that got off to a slow start. I believe they were 2-5 when they lost to the Vikings in the Kirk Cousins Achilles game. They turned it around. They wind up making a run towards the playoffs. They win a playoff game against Dallas, who I didn't think was that good, but they were able to do it. Then they go to San Francisco and they lose a close game there. The team that wound up taking the Chiefs to overtime in the Super Bowl. If the Vikings can pull out a playoff appearance, and I know a lot of people will be like, all you got to do is get in the dance and go from there. Yeah, I think this year would be house money. like there would be low expectations, and that's not a bad thing, but get to the playoffs, make a run. Maybe you are a 9-8 team and you just barely miss. The Lions did that a couple of years ago where they won a whole bunch of games towards the end of the year. Coming into the following year, they're everybody's favorite team outside of people in the NFC North. And then they go and make a run to the NFC Championship game. The Vikings obviously had that first round pick. Could be a top 10 pick if this thing implodes, or it could be like a top 12 pick like they had last year, and they can get a talented player, maybe a corner, maybe an edge rusher, maybe an interior offensive or defensive lineman. There's a lot of things that they can do to build this team. And then they have all the cap space and free agency, where some of that's going to be used up when they reach a Christian Darrisaw extension. They used a little bit of that on the Justin Jefferson extension. They have avenues to improve this team from this time a year ago. And it's almost kind of like when you're playing a Madden franchise and you go, well, my team's not going to be good enough. I'm just going to sim, add a whole bunch of pieces, and make this a contender. That's basically what we're looking at right here. I'm going to stop a second and look at the comments here. Here we go. Viking Jerome is not happy with the Falcons ruling. He goes, F the Falcons and the league. Go figure. I mean, this falls into the typical Minnesota sports thinking, right? Like if this were any other team, the Falcons would have given up 3 first-round picks to the Vikings or whatever. If this were the Packers would have gotten a haul. I mean, you could be upset. I think, like I said, the writing was kind of on the wall for Kirk Cousins leaving, and it doesn't make it okay. And the Falcons were punished, but it's a light tap on the wrist. So would I have loved to have seen a bigger penalty? Yes, but I understand why the NFL didn't come down with some sort of death penalty when it came to a Falcons ruling. So that's basically what that is. I'm going to do one more thing before we get off here. And of course, if you have more comments, go ahead, fire away. It's totally cool. We'll run by those at the end of the show. But JJ McCarthy talked to the reporters on, I believe it was Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. But, he basically just said, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to wait my turn. Said he grew up watching Sam Darnold, which was kind of funny, and Nick Mullins, but maybe it's partially true. But, he said he's thrown 1 pass to Justin Jefferson so far. That was kind of one of the key takeaways. His locker is next to Justin Jefferson, so there is that going for him. And he also said he's going to remain at TCO Performance Center over the next month to digest the playbook, which is awesome. Like Kirk Cousins didn't go in on Tuesdays, and JJ McCarthy might be waking up at the facility on Tuesdays. But, he's ready to go. He's ready to compete. Adam Patrick, my normal co-host, he tweeted out, I think it was last night, that at this time, I can't remember how long it was ago, but Ryan Tannehill was a rookie for the Miami Dolphins. And they said, there's no way he can win this job during training camp. He goes in, he beats out the quarterbacks in front of him, and he gets the starting nod week 1. There is a possibility JJ McCarthy shows up for training camp. He shows enough. He beats out Sam Darnold and Nick Mullins, who really are house of cards quarterbacks and just kind of placeholders until you get things going. But I think that training camp is going to be really interesting. And I do wonder too, what is the Vikings plan here? Like, they want him to hit benchmarks. They want him to do, they want him to find consistency. One of the things with his arm is that he can rip it. He just doesn't have the touch throws. I think Matthew Collar had a funny analogy where he said, JJ McCarthy took up golf. He golfs a little bit, and he asked him, what's your chipping like? Because you can't just rip it when you're, 15 yards in front of the pin. You gotta, put a little touch on it and maybe, have it glide across the green a little bit. Those are terrible golf terms. When I golf, I usually just have like 4 or 5 beers right from the jump and go, boys, we're not breaking any records today. So that's kind of how I think there. But, does this team want to do the Dante Culpepper type development plan where he sits for a year, he sits behind Darnold and Mullins, just like Culpepper did against Jeff George and Randall Cunningham in his rookie year? Then he takes the job the next year, and the Vikings are in the 2000 NFC Championship game because he's surrounded by a great offensive line. He has Robert Smith in the backfield. He has Chris Carter and Randy Moss at wideout. He has Jake Reed as well. Like, that offense was fine-tuned to explode in 2000, and Dante Culpepper took advantage of that. Is that something we're looking toward when we think of J.J. McCarthy? So those are things you can think about. Another thing that I kind of want to get to before we go, Dallas Turner getting a lot of love, really, as we head out of the OTAs. He said, we heard Christian Darrisaw's comments where he said, holy fuck, when it came to his swim move that he put on a offensive lineman, an anonymous offensive. It's like witness protection right now. Nobody wants to out the guy because, I don't know, maybe that's something where other teams will look at that and be like, oh, so you did it to David Quisenberry, huh? So if Quisenberry goes in the lineup, we'll just have to attack him. You don't want to do those things. But Turner's a big fan of Jonathan Grenard so far, has talked very positively about kind of soaking in the information. Grenard, of course, was on a Houston Texans defense a year ago and saw Will Anderson Jr. rack up 7 sacks and win the Defensive Player of the Year award. Defensive Rookie of the Year, I should say. And I think this pass rush is a little better than it was a year ago. Yeah, you lose Danielle Hunter. He put up big numbers in the sack department, but I think their number one goal should be get pressure on the quarterback. And the Vikings blitzed the most out of any team in the NFL last year, but they could not get pressure. I think they were in the 20s when it came to pressure rate, but they were number one in terms of blitz. I don't think they'll have that much of a problem this year. The interior defensive line is a little bit of a question for me because Harrison Phillips was stretched out a little bit too thin, had to play a lot of snaps. There is some buzz on Jerry Tillery looking good, but that's, of course, in shorts and not, shells right now because you can't have full contact practices. I like this pass rush. I like adding Grenard, Van Ginkel, and Cashman to the mix. And then, I think this will pay off very quickly because a lot of people were like, well, you traded for Dallas Turner. You gave up all these picks. Well, screw it. If the player is, an impact player on defense, I think whatever you gave up is worth it. So if you have, this is a very old example, but like Chris Dolman was selected as a top 3 pick in the draft. Vikings didn't have to give up a lot, but he took the field and was an impact player immediately on defense. I think Luke Braun, in his History of the Vikings documentary, which you should go watch if you're bored over the summer and just want to binge something, get a little football fix. It's great. It starts from the beginning of the franchise's history to, I think, just a couple of years ago. I want to say 2022, 23. I can't really remember when it was, but, he called Chris Dolman the Randy Moss of the defense. Can Dallas Turner have that impact? That's pretty high standards, but it's something I think that he can do coming out of Alabama as one of the top pass rushers. So the defense is going to be interesting. We got about a month and a half to kind of speculate like what the Vikings could do differently in the second year of Brian Flores, but I think Dallas Turner is going to be a big part of it. Let's see. I think we got another one right now. Okay, here we go. Kenny 49ers, our favorite 49ers fan, has chimed in. Serious question. What were the Vikings thinking giving Justin Jefferson all that money and no legit quarterback to get him the ball? So Kenny, obviously a 49ers fan, as you can tell by his handle, had Sam Darnold as his backup quarterback. And again, this is the Sam Darnold effect. You see Sam Darnold on the roster and you go, oh, he's shit. He sucks. Like the whole team's going to suck because the quarterback sucks. But we've seen supporting casts, prop up quarterbacks. It's happening in Detroit right now with Jared Goff. Jared Goff's making $52 million a year because he has Amon-Ra St. Brown. He has an elite running defense behind him, and he's driving the car. I know a lot of Vikings fans were sick of that analogy, but that's what's happening over there. To say that they don't have a legit quarterback to get him the ball, I would find that Nick Mullins had a great time getting him the ball. He also had a bad time dealing with interceptions, which kind of cost him some games, But Justin Jefferson was able to produce with Nick Mullins, with Josh Dobbs, where I don't think he had a great game against the Packers with Jaron Hall. That was just kind of a delete from memory game for me because it was the unofficial end of the Vikings season. But, I don't think the Vikings gave themselves a death sentence by signing Sam Darnold. And I sure as hell don't think that if JJ McCarthy comes in, that's going to change anything either, because I'm optimistic about McCarthy. I don't know if he'll be a franchise, game changer, Patrick Mahomes quarterback. And I would ask the question, who is? But if they hit on JJ McCarthy and they have Justin Jefferson locked in, that's a Super Bowl window. That's the cheap thing. I mean, if you want to compare this to Kirk Cousins, Kirk Cousins got Justin Jefferson the ball. They won a lot of games because he made more good decisions than bad decisions. That's basically the difference. But and Kenny also mentioned Sam has had some issues with turnovers. Yeah, absolutely. That's why I think in training camp they're going to give JJ McCarthy a chance to win the job, even if they aren't saying it. But I don't think that it's going to totally derail the Vikings to a point where they only win 3 games if Sam Darnold is making bad decisions. And if he does, they're going to go to JJ McCarthy or somebody else who is going to make fewer bad decisions. So I think long term, the Vikings are set up where if McCarthy isn't good, you might have an average year or two, but you also get another crack at it in a couple years, especially if, the supporting cast is so good. Okay, you built a great cast around this quarterback. Let's give you another crack at finding a franchise guy and going there. So again, I think Justin Jefferson's worth every penny for this team. And some of these big contracts you look at and you go, I wouldn't have paid him that much. Justin Jefferson's a guy the Vikings absolutely had to keep. And that is why it's happening. I'll go one more here because I hate having conversations with one person during the pod, but I do appreciate the comments. But he says, I'm more concerned that you may have another Devontae Adams on his hands because he may want to actually have stats. He's going to put him up either way. He's Justin Jefferson. And I just got done explaining he caught passes under Nick Mullins. So whatever. But thank you for commenting. I don't want to say that I don't appreciate the comment. I just disagree. I don't think that Justin Jefferson's going to be, I don't think you're going to see Justin Jefferson only catch 40 passes for 600 yards and 5 touchdowns because Sam Darnold's his quarterback. That's what I'm saying. So there's that right now. So this has been the Viking Age podcast. My name is Chris Schad. You can follow me at The Real Chris Schad right there on X. I do some stuff on Instagram as well. So if you want to check me out over there, still saying I'm going to do some social videos, but I haven't really had the chance to do that. Hopefully we'll start with that in the next week. But we do this show right here every Monday with a late week episode right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're also in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. But however you consume us, make sure you rate, comment, like, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. I am Chris Schad, and this has been the Viking Age Podcast.